Hello everyone, and welcome to the Oliver Creek Church of Christ Online. My name is Smith Hopkins, and I'm the preaching minister for Oliver Creek. If you don't know, our campus is located in Bartlett, Tennessee, just outside of Memphis. And so if you're ever in our area, and especially if you live in our area, we would love to see you sometime soon. Once we get back worshiping and in class together on site, it would be a joy to have you. Thank you for joining us today. At Oliver Creek, our mission is the mission of God in Scripture, to be a church where people are transformed into the image of Jesus Christ. Here's what we think that looks like. It looks like people who glorify God with their lives and in worship. It looks like people who love one another and are connected like a family in Christ. And it looks like people who bless the world, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ in word and deed. That's what we're all about here at Oliver Creek. And we hope that this service today can help you be transformed into His image. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started in a few minutes. Welcome to Light in the Darkness. Parenting is hard. Parenting is the hardest thing I've ever done. Parenting in a pandemic? That's even more difficult. Have you noticed this? There's been so many extra pressures on parents right now. I talked to a family this week. Mom and dad are both working at home, and they have a child in the home, and now there's no child care, there's no school. Even family isn't able to come in and help. They're having to work early morning, sometimes late night shifts. They're doing shift work just to get the parenting done throughout the day. There's so much extra pressure on parents with education, with work, and with all the other anxieties of the pandemic falling on us. In Light in the Darkness, the series, what we're doing is trying to equip our members and anyone watching to equip folks to walk with light, the light of Jesus Christ in the darkness. There's a lot of darkness right now, but we believe that there's actually hidden glimpses of light, these extra gifts of grace that come along in this trial. God has a way of working every bad, hard thing for good, for His purposes and for His glory. I think He can do that with parents, with families, and with our kids. For the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of uncertainty. When are we going back to school? When am I going to see my friends again? When do I get to see my teachers? And for most of the time, we just haven't had answers. We've only been given information from authorities a week or 2 weeks at a time. But this week, the governor of Tennessee announced that our schools are now closed through the end of the year. And we now know for sure that our kids will not be going back to school at least until August. We have many months ahead of us. Parenting in a pandemic is hard, but I think it's time for us to parent. Now, there's a hidden gift here. In the midst of the extra pressure and the problems of the crisis that we're facing, the education and the discipleship of our kids is now falling to us. And that's an extra burden that my own family is understanding and living as we speak. But at the same time, there's this huge opportunity before us. I think many parents have often relied perhaps too heavily on the church to disciple their kids, on their schools to train their kids. But now, the responsibility is where it always was, on parents. Parents, what are we going to do to give our kids the rhythms and routines of daily life, of normal instruction, but also discipleship to Jesus? Are we going to be able to give them the routines and rhythms that they desire and that they deserve? And here's the real kicker, that will actually help you thrive. Today, I'm going to bring on 3 families to help us understand and speak to some of the tensions as well as the rhythms and spiritual habits that you're trying to build into their homes. There's a gift here because now your child's discipleship rests on you as it always did. I'm going to introduce in just a minute some of my very favorite people at Oliver Creek, as well as the best parent I know, my wife, Kelsey. We welcome Tom and Kathy, Luke and Ashton, and Kelsey to Light in the Darkness. I'd like to welcome some of my best friends and favorite people at Oliver Creek to Light in the Darkness. Tom and Kathy Wright, welcome. Can you kind of wave so our guests know who y'all are? Tom and Kathy are the parents of 4 children ranging from elementary school all the way up to sophomore in high school. Luke and Ashton Guard, they're actually both Recovery Coalition members, and Luke is one of my co-ministers at Oliver Creek. They've got a 4-year-old, and I think each one of these couples brings a unique tension and wisdom. And then I'm also joined by my beautiful wife, Kelsey, who can speak to the tension going on in our home right now. Can we just walk through and kind of set the stage for the unique pressures that your family's facing right now? And I think it's going to be different even between the 3 of us, the 3 couples here. And it's probably going to be different for a lot of the families listening. But with 3 different ones, we can speak to a lot of what's going on. So Tom and Kathy, let's start with y'all, then go to the guards.
So on my end, it's kind of business as usual for me. I'm still going to work. I work at the office every day as before. Most of the tension is happening at home with all the people who are now cooped up in the pressure cooker together. So they've got some extra tension there. And my role is kind of to come home from work and be the release valve a little bit and occupy the kids or play a round of Connect 4 with somebody or do something to give them something else to do besides be with each other the way they've been all day.
So Kathy, he gets to be away at the office. What's it like at home?
I'm a little jealous sometimes, I won't lie. When he leaves in the morning, I'm thinking, oh, that'd be nice. Well, what it's like here, as you mentioned, we have 3rd and 5th graders. We have an 8th grader and a 10th grader. And so the age ranges are so varied, and the way they've all kind of reacted to this has been very different. The little 2, honestly, at first just thought, it's a party, it's an extended break, and they're really not sad at all about all of the things that maybe they're missing, because I don't think they're really thinking about them. They're just enjoying time at home. They miss their friends, of course, but not to the degree of my older kids, where they have definitely been feeling loss of some of the things that they were looking so forward to. Their schedules were a lot busier because they're older and they had more extracurriculars going on that now have all ground to a halt. And so honestly, when it first began and we were unsure of how long this was going to go on, even as recently as today, we now know that this will continue at least till the end of the school year. I'll be honest, I was very overwhelmed at the prospect of an unknown amount of time and what am I going to get from the teachers and how much are we going to be able to do at home and how's this going to work with all of us on shared devices at the same time. And so one thing that I wanted to do is try to recognize that with teenagers anyway, something unique about them they have a need to, it's their tendency, even the ones that are super extroverted, to kind of isolate themselves from their family a little bit. That's just part of the teenage experience, is you're trying to get your own boundaries and your own life, and you don't want somebody all up in your business all the time. And so I wanted to try to find a balance between a rigid schedule that wasn't going to work for us, where I said at 8 a.m. we're going to all, do this, and then we're all going to do this. But at the same time, I also know that they can tend to, they could hide in their rooms and we wouldn't see them except meals if we left them to their own devices. And that's a typical teenage thing too. And that can turn very quickly into a depressive kind of mindset. And so whether they realize it or not, they need interaction with us, but they don't need constant interaction with us. It's not like with a younger child. So what we found worked to help us, and it really, Tom would say in the last week, our mood has all been, I'd say, a lot better than even the previous weeks, is because rather than have a schedule of everybody doing math at 8 o'clock and everybody doing reading at 9, we have what I call a checklist, and we give all the kids basically a list of about 8 things that they need to get done each day. They know that there's hours between, right now we're doing 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., some days longer, where there's no tech at all that's not school related. So they're not playing video games, they're not watching TV, they're not chatting on their phones, they're doing their schoolwork, getting their assignments done. They have a little bit of family, chore to do. They've got a Bible verse to go, or a scripture passage to read, and they have to get outside. They have to go around the block a couple of times, sit in the yard. And it's worked better for us because my 16-year-old, almost 16, and my 9-year-old don't both operate the same. And so I couldn't make a schedule that was going to make everybody work at the same level. And this so far has worked really well for us, because the kid that wants to get their school stuff done right first thing, they're going to do it. And then the one that, my 9-year-old and my 11-year-old, they can spend 30 minutes working, but then they need a 10-minute trampoline break. And so we take it, and sometimes that turns into an hour, and that's fine. They just know we've got to get these things done. And until we do, we're gonna, we're not going to have that downtime with the technology that we're trying to always fight that wave of too much technology. And I've had to let some of that go too now, because their social interactions are all on technology, just like we're talking right now.
Yep. So it sounds like you're mindful of their tension so much, but you don't want to be too rigid. You also don't want to be too lax, because you're actually trying to think about what's best for them. What's best for them is some combination of both of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've heard you call that boundaries, but they're flexible. So like flexible boundaries.
Yeah.
I love that you have some key cogs that you're trying to hit every day, but they have the freedom to choose when they're going to do those. I'd love to ask y'all about assembling that trampoline, but I don't think we have time for that on this call.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Guards, can you speak to working at home and being childcare and teacher and all of that all at the same time, and then kind of how you work through it, what you're doing about it?
Yeah. So I'm still teaching virtually, and then Luke's also still working full time. While that looks totally different, there are still work expectations that have to be met. And we'll be honest, the first week and a half, I guess, it was a little bit chaotic, and that was 100% our own doing. We learned very quickly that some clear communication was going to have to be in place.
How did you learn that?
Built up tension and just,
Yeah.
yeah. So we now have a calendar system that we use, my work times, and even non-work times. So just any time that I can't be fully engaged with the family is listed on the calendar. So mine's in blue, his is in black. We make sure they don't overlap. And if they do overlap, we make sure it's something that's informal that, Hudson can tag along beside us. And that has helped tremendously, just communicating. I mean, it's crazy how that works when you talk to each other and establish some, I guess, ground rules.
Yeah. And it's kind of like Kathy said too, of like the first week we did it, we figured out what part of it worked and what needed to be revamped. We're still doing that. I mean, we're still trying to figure out what works best, because we are both trying to juggle so many different roles right now.
So it seems to me like those explosions kind of take a few days before they kind of simmer and then boil over. But then once that happens, communication's just more free and it's easier. Has that been your experience so far?
Definitely. Even just up to a few hours ago,
Yeah.
we talked about how now that we know we're in this until the end of the school year, and we know how our Monday through Friday typically looks now, it's time for a new schedule.
Right.
And speaking of schedules, we started off with a pretty rigid schedule, and I still somewhat keep that. We only have one child who is 4. And while he is extremely extroverted, he also is very regimented and needs some sort of routine, and really needs somebody with him most of the time. So our day definitely looks more rigid than if we were to have teenagers or whatever. But in that, there is still some flexibility, lax in some areas for sure, for sanity purposes.
I think y'all have a really good insight there, that as you get more information, you then have to, part of flexibility is remaking plans quickly. And it's almost a combination of what Kathy was saying earlier. It's boundaries, it's planning, but flexibly.
Right.
Leading our families requires so much flexibility right now. Kelsey, can you speak to what's going on in our home and how you're navigating that?
Yeah, so we have 3 kids, 7, 4, and 2. And the 4-year-old's technically in school. We do a little bit of homeschool with him, but then the 7-year-old is in 1st grade, so she has full out homeschooling at this point. And so I think that's one of the biggest tensions is trying to juggle the other 2, especially the very loud and rambunctious 2-year-old with teaching. And I would assume, well, Kathy, I bet with your younger 2, you have to do some hands-on teaching. But I feel like that's one of the differences with us is when Annie's doing school, I'm teaching, I have to be present. She can't there's a few things she can do independently, but it's very hands-on. And thankfully it's not for an extended period of time, but finding the time and the quiet and the focus to be able to teach her well, and having things for the other 2 to do is one of the biggest challenges.
Meanwhile, I'm upstairs trying to be productive or on a call or on a Zoom meeting, sometimes without her really knowing. So we're trying to keep a quiet space in our house if I'm working from home. And then that puts extra pressure because we only have so many quiet spaces that are possible when you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old who are also in the house.
Yeah. And I'm tuned in teaching one and don't know that another one's escaped upstairs, or whatever. So, and then I just think that the change just in schedule in general, kind of not even knowing necessarily what to expect day to day. Sometimes he's needing to do meetings or calls or taping things in the evening versus the day, or we're needing to do school at a different time because I can't keep Evie occupied or something like that. So there's having to be a lot of flexibility. While like you were saying, Ash, they thrive with some structure. And so trying to find a way to give structure and set expectations, but yet realize some days that just has to be flushed down the toilet because there's, everyone's trying to do their own thing and it gets crazy. So
do you remember last year when I think it was a British expert who's been interviewed on the news from home and a child popped into the room and it just went viral?
Yes.
Now that's that's every day, all the time, and it's not funny anymore. So there's a lot of that happening in calls and Zoom meetings. Maybe even at the right home right now. We're not sure who's popping.
It could happen at any
moment.
So Kelsey, what's kind of the key word or how you're navigating some of that need for flexibility, but also structure?
So we're calling it our sequence of events. And so
Kelsey's a little schedule resistant.
Yeah.
So instead of saying this, then this, then this, she's just saying, at some point, we're going to accomplish these things today.
Yeah. Mostly probably because I want to get it right. So if it's like set and I get off by 30 minutes or an hour, then I'm stressed. So it's similar to what the Wrights have going on, but just more on a little people schedule or time frame. So we kind of have an order at which we do things, but our start time could vary from 7:30 to 9:30, depending on when we get up and how we get rolling. So it's more like doing family worship, and then after that's breakfast, and then after that's chores, and then after that's school. So it varies, but we know, same sort of thing. We know we've got to get these things done before we have this type of freedom or whatever. So you kind of got to get those things checked off. But then again, there's additional flexibility that like maybe today we've got to scrap chores because it's already lunchtime and we haven't gotten to that, or, you know, whatever, move some of our schoolwork to another day. So just a lot of flexibility needing to happen in this household for sure.
I think we've all said that in different vocabulary. We're kind of using our family's vocabulary to say boundaries and flexibility, schedule but compromise. There's conversations that need to be happening in every home if they're not already, and they probably are. But to kind of diffuse that just by saying, this is stressful for you, this is stressful for me, let's talk through the best way to navigate this. Luke, I think there's an opportunity. I'd love your help kind of speaking to this. I think there's an opportunity that may be like a gift of grace that's been given in the middle of all this tension and struggle that parents are facing with their kids. Can you help me describe, if you're still connected there? I may have lost you.
Oh, there they are.
Can you help me describe how neat of an opportunity this is for parents? And especially when it comes to spiritual rhythms, how unique this is.
Yeah. I mean, I know we've experienced this, and I've gotten to hear stories from others as well. You know, one of the things that we're dealing with right now is because, and Kathy kind of mentioned this, because our schedules have kind of been hijacked, right? And so I think the older your kids, the more events that have been like canceled or postponed, or, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen. It's opened up a lot of free time. I don't think we call it free because it doesn't feel like we're free, but it is this time that we used to not have somehow, and now we do. And so I think that there's just a lot of opportunities now to, instead of using that time, you know, just to like binge watch or veg out, to actually say like, let's devote it to growing or learning in a much healthier way than maybe sitting in front of Netflix for hours on end is. And so I know, like in our home, one way that looks is getting to take walks together or making a fire in the backyard, and actually letting our 4-year-old stay up a little later than he would on a normal weekday night, right? I mean, we don't have to rush to get him where he needs to be in the morning as much. And so amid, I don't know, I guess in the midst of all the tension and change and some frustration, there's been tons of blessings. I think, again, hearing from other families as well, just to kind of try to capitalize on that time. And Kathy, I love what you said specifically was, you know, you take like a 10-minute trampoline break, but then it turns into an hour. Mm-hmm. And like, when does that happen before all this started, right? Like, we don't have an hour to be on the trampoline together. It's like you only get 10 minutes. And so I think whether it's devoted to some sort of spiritual discipline or just kind of devoted to like time with one another, I think sometimes we miss that too. It's just to be together and ask questions and just especially with the weather we've had, which has been pretty awesome.
Yep. I've heard people describe it like we're going back in time to the
Mm-hmm.
80s or to the 60s, where it's like, instead of just sitting in front of a screen, kids are playing outside, and our neighborhood is just filled with people walking and riding bikes and together with their family. It's like the meaning of leisure is now actually accessible to people because of the churn has kind of slowed down. Wrights, I used to live in your neighborhood, and I think it was Tuesday, may have been Thursday. You described yourself as a shuttle service, just going from one thing to the next to the next. How is this different right now, just from a churn perspective?
Well, I'm probably the main churner, right? I'm the driver, the taxi driver. I'll say I've filled up once in the
I think
last
we know that.
3 weeks. Well, sort of like what Luke has said. I mean, there have been many times that it's been so frustrating to where we look at our calendars and go, oh my goodness, we have one night this week that nobody has to go anywhere. Like that's a gift. And now every night looks like that.
Yeah.
And in terms of the things that the kids are missing, they're all good things. And I was just talking to a friend on the phone about this today when she and I were talking about feeling sad about knowing what they were now going to miss. May is usually for a parent of school age kids like just a sprint. It is just grueling. And it's so full that by the time summer comes, you can't wait, to be out. But it's all good things that are filling you up. So it's not necessarily that anybody could have predicted, I want everything in our lives to come to a halt. And yet, so much of that time has been rediscovered. Like Luke said about the trampoline break, or my daughter who has a driving permit. We can go on a driving lesson nearly any day of the week when she says, hey, let's go drive. We can drive. We might go see a friend and stand in the driveway and talk for an hour. And that would never have happened under normal circumstances. So you have to try to focus on being thankful for that, I think.
Yeah, Kathy, I like how you're speaking to the grief and to the loss, but also to the blessings. I think it's important that we do both of those in our families and with our kids right now. You just mentioned thankfulness, and that makes me think of how we're not only freed up for leisure and freed up for family time, but we're also freed up to put God into our calendars. If you've ever been frustrated about God not being part of the school calendar, now is the time that you get control of your child's calendar in their day-to-day. You guys probably know the Transforming Graces at Oliver Creek. Kathy, I'm not going to quiz you and Tom on this, but let me just name off the 6 graces. It's an acronym that we use all the time with our members. And so if you're not a member listening, you can just jot these down. Maybe I'll put them on the screen. Now I'm obligated to. So G is give thanks, reflect on the word, ask deeper questions, commune with God, eat together, and serve your neighbor. I think that all of our families are probably doing these in a variety of ways. So I'd love to hear some of what you're doing. Guards, what does giving thanks look like for you right now with each other and with Hudson?
Yeah, really cool opportunities right now. We usually spend time, I guess, either the dinner table or at bedtime, kind of going over what we're thankful for. But for the past few weeks, we get to do that on like walks and by campfire in the backyard. And Hudson actually knows it's a game now of, what are you thankful for? And so I know that's one way that we like to play it. And it's cool. There's just something different about doing it when you're outside, especially by a fire. And kind of, I don't know, I think the way I've described it before is like, it feels more like a moment, there's something almost like special and sacred about it. And so I know also for Ashton and I, the days where the moments we've had, I guess, where the schedule didn't work out, or we both had a lot going on, it's been really important for us two to slow down and say, man, just to point out those blessings and to be intentional about giving thanks.
Yeah. Speaking blessings and thankfulness out loud. I'm with you. I think being outside and being around a fire is a great way to it's a multiplier effect on thankfulness. Can you tell me how to play the game?
Yeah. So if my 4-year-old knows how to play, it's pretty simple. We essentially just take turns saying I am thankful for, and then fill in the blank. And sometimes Hudson will get really excited and he'll just go in 3 or 4 straight. And it's like, it's my turn now. I want to be thankful for something.
And then we've challenged him, to turn those thanks into his prayers, I'm jumping ahead to commune with God, but just to sort of take it to a deeper level, because he's getting the hang of it now. He'll say what he's thankful for and then ask back,
Yeah.
You know, what are you thankful for? And then, so like tonight when he was saying the prayer before dinner, we said, list 3 things that you said you were thankful for. And he was able to whip out 3 of those things. So.
Yeah. And to kind of the point, I think Kathy mentioned earlier, some of the grief or loss is another way we've played the game is to ask, like, what are some things you miss right now? And that, I think that's helped him lament as much as maybe a 4-year-old can, but also to recognize, like, there may be some things that you're thankful for that you didn't realize until you couldn't do them or couldn't be with those people right now.
Yep. Lament and praise are always so close together, even for 4-year-olds. That's really good. Wrights, how does reflecting on the word look like for your family? Is it helping that you get to slow down? What does that look like right now?
That's, to me, one of the biggest blessings about the situation we're in now is a couple of years ago, we used to be really good about having a Devo each night at dinner. We'd all gather around the table together as a family and eat dinner and have a little Devo. And then once Anna got to high school, it just really upped the complexity of our schedules. And so the nights where we're all together around the table at the same time are the exception and not the rule. Someone's got a soccer practice, or someone's got a play practice, or a band competition, or, you know, everyone's got something and they're all on different nights. And so all of that going away has turned into a blessing of, hey, every night we can get that back and all be together again. And we're using Oliver Creek's reading list as a basis of that. So one of the tasks that the kids have to do during the day along with their schoolwork is to read that day's scripture, and then at night we can talk about what each person got out of the reading for the day.
And then I'll say, I was thinking about this today, the fruits of the Spirit, because I was thinking, I need some more patience. We could use more joy, maybe some peace with all these things that are now being thrown at us, you know. But I'm seeing results. I'm seeing thankfulness for sure, and kindness in my kids, not every minute of every day, but in increasing measure. And I think that has something to do with the fact that they're taking the time to reflect on the word, think about those scriptures. We don't have to cut off any of the conversations because we've got to rush out the door anywhere. Yeah. And when they're asked to do just things around the house, they really, we used to get a lot more pushback, honestly, than I'm getting now when I ask them help with the laundry, help with the dishes, you know, trash, any of those things. And I really think that that has to do with their understanding of being thankful and just treating each other with the way that God wants us to, because we have a little more time to be more just thoughtful about everything we're doing.
Yeah. I think that's really wise. You said so many good things I want to dive in on. You spoke about your kids not really being thrilled about chores. My guess is they're probably not really thrilled about being assigned reading lists. So what's it like to provide expectations knowing that it's going to some days lead to frustration, but you have something on the other end that's even better for them that you think God can give through those things?
Well, I would say it's like you said, when we were initially talking about the way that we are structuring our days, is we're making some boundaries that they may not all of them may be appreciated by them, but we're doing it for their ultimate good. So that would be my answer, I would think, to that is, I know that even if they're looking at it, there may be a morning they wake up and they're like, oh, here goes the checklist. gotta read the scripture. You know, we just got into Acts. I want to say today, Acts might have been the beginning. It's still, by the end of the day, maybe 10 a.m. when they read that, but by the time we get to 5 or 6 or even 7 that we're eating, we haven't really gotten a lot of pushback from that either. Would you say?
I think they notice on some level that they're happier when they may think, their initial thought may be, if I could just sit in front of Netflix all day, that'll be the best. But they realize at the end of the day, they're not happy. You know, they're depressed because they've been sitting by themselves looking at Netflix all day. When under this, you know, they get to the end of the day and they may have been doing items on the list that they wouldn't have thought of as being something fun, but the variety and everything and the direction has resulted in them being in a better mood.
And Kelsey, I know you said before that you have different kids when they are inside all day versus getting outside.
Mhm.
So, and I think that that's true, not even necessarily outside the home, but as he was alluding to, just the screens too. You're going to have a different kid when they spend all day just doing that. And so, again, it's for their better. It's for my good too. I get a little stir crazy when there's always a device on all the time. So I operate better when we give them the gift of boundaries and say, this time we're not going to have any, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you're drawing a picture or just looking at looking out the window, that's fine. But you're not, and usually they end up enjoying that time quite a bit, I think.
Yeah. Guards and Wright, y'all both talked about how your families are having more joy with each other and moments and memories. And some of it's because you're providing boundaries and schedules and you're being intentional. I think the same thing's happening in our family. So the next of the graces is to ask deeper questions and to commune with God. Kelsey, can you speak to any of those habits that we might be doing in our home?
Yeah. So obviously asking deeper questions with littles who are 7 and under looks different than it would in a teenage home.
Especially with a 2-year-old.
Although she's getting in on it. So we primarily do that at the dinner table. And we usually do it in the format of highs and lows. So that's been something we've been doing for a while. And our kids love it. They ask for it and get so excited to share theirs.
They don't just do highs and lows. They do highs and lows and mediums. This is something Fletcher invented. A medium is the thing that made you laugh that day. It's the silly thing from the day.
Which is probably our favorite part of high, low, medium now, because we all get to laugh at it. But the way that we've tried to incorporate asking deeper questions on their age level is that now we don't just go around, but each person takes a turn asking someone else what their high and low is. And then we've added in another step of them reflecting it back to that person. So obviously that happens on different levels depending on who's reflecting, but even Fletcher can, who's 4, can kind of follow the format that we've laid out. So he'll say, sounds like your high was that you played outside. Sounds like your low was you went to timeout. So he just kind of repeats it. But then like with Annie, we're kind of working with her on identifying like emotions and feelings that go along with it. So it sounds like you were sad that you had to go to timeout, and sounds like you were excited that you have so much time to play outside or whatever. And then we try to do that even more to model it for them. So just having them practice actually asking the question, even though it's the same question every night, and then practice really listening. So obviously we have times where it's time for them to repeat it and they have to say, can you say it again? Because I didn't listen, but just practicing the listening, because I think that's a skill that's hard to get good at sometimes.
Can you also tell them about family worship time?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we do on our sequence of events is our family worship. And it's honestly as much for me as it is for the kids. So we all get off on a better start with that being our initial focus. So sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes. It really just depends on the day and their engagement. And it looks different almost every time. There's a lot of YouTube worship channels that they like to do, and they will yell out their favorite one that they want to play. Or our fireplace has like a ledge that they get up on, and that's the stage. And so they'll pray up on the stage, or they'll lead a song, or Annie will read a scripture, or they'll recite something. So I try to just see what they want to do, what they are excited about doing, and try to incorporate that. It just kind of sets the tone for our day, sets our focus, and make sure that we get something that's such a high priority on our list as parents to grow in them, that gets high priority in our schedule. So similar to what you were saying, Kathy, like it's got to be put on the list, or else it doesn't happen. So, I mean, Annie has a Bible section in her schoolwork, and it's not like that wasn't already taking place, but just adding it in an intentional way to grow different things in them. We've seen already some exciting fruit from that.
Yeah. You could also speak to how you're trying to build that rhythm in for yourself whenever the kids have quiet time and reading time. But I think it's important for each of these disciplines to be cultivated in our kids, but also modeled by our parents. Right, you've already spoken about eat together. Is there something special that happens at the table for y'all?
Well, I mean, we go over, as we said, the scriptures that we have maybe read for the day, that we focused on.
We have a rotation for who leads the prayer, so
Mhm.
everyone gets a night of the week.
Yeah, very good.
So spread that around.
Guards, I've heard about some of your scheduling. Kelsey told me, I think it's in the afternoon, there's a block of time designated for Bless the World. Ashton, what does that look like in your family? How do you serve your neighbor?
Well, like I said earlier, we have a very extroverted child, and so he has a need to see people and talk to people and make people laugh and ultimately bring joy. So I've sort of combined that with our intention of blessing the world, and we take about 30 minutes to an hour each day, either FaceTiming different people from church. We'll use the church directory to find different people to reach out to. Sometimes it's just family members, or we'll make a card or a video message. Just a way to, it's really multi-purpose. We're checking in on someone, we're blessing them. He's getting to feel that extroverted side of him. And so it's important for us to keep that going for sure.
Yeah. I think what you were just saying is probably true of all these habits, that it's not just that doing them is good for other people or doing them is something that God wants from us. It's actually good for us. It brings in joy and peace and the fruit of the Spirit that Kathy was talking about earlier. In our last couple of minutes, here's what I'd love to hear your reflections on. Can you talk about where you're seeing God's grace, where you're seeing the need for grace right now?
Who first?
Whenever you're ready.
We can go first.
I
I think we're definitely seeing grace from our employers, which has been huge. Of course, the elders have been totally understanding and full of grace, and even my administration at school as well. So while there are still expectations that we have to meet, we know that we can meet those, and there's still grace offered if it looks a little bit different than it did before. And then I feel like I need grace all the time because I am very checklist, goal driven, schedule oriented. And that's just not happening right now, or at least it's not happening in the way that it normally does. And so I'm trying to give myself a lot of grace, and this guy's good at giving it to me too.
Yeah. Well, and earlier today, I was actually telling her that me knowing that she is someone who really thrives on a rigid schedule and everything's kind of the same day after day. I've been so proud and honestly surprised at how well she's done. It's such a weird time, because I'm usually more of the go with the flow person, and I'm the one that's kind of I don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. I'm used to having at least a meal planned or something. And so I think, she mentioned kind of our employers. I've also seen God's grace kind of show through people calling to check on me. And usually the phone call begins with, I know you're calling to check on a lot of people, or I know your job is to help others, and I just want to make sure you're getting a call. And every time someone's called or made that, kind of communicated that, I've been surprised at how much it's encouraged me. And so it's really been easy to move towards thankfulness for that. I see the need for grace with how I'm responding to being a stay-at-home dad / working from home, husband and everything else in between. It's I'm glad we're gonna have a while to figure this out, because I'm gonna get a lot of practice. Because just a lot of moments where I'm falling short, but I am given that grace from Ashton and from God, and definitely seeing the need for my own actions and responses too.
I'm seeing grace just out in the neighborhood when I go out to run or do whatever. I'm seeing people who I know their name now, and I didn't before. I'm seeing other neighbors talking to, people who never interacted with each other before. Now that we're all stuck at home, people are trying to get out of the house as much as possible and get out in the open air, and they're running into people they never ran into before. So all this is kind of, like you said earlier, it feels like the 80s again, where people knew their neighbors, and that's another source of someone to lean on when you need them.
We wouldn't know. How was the 80s?
It was awesome.
Oh, you know what? Okay, sure.
Rad.
It was. I'm sorry you missed it. I would say for sure, grace as far where I'm seeing it is, to be perfectly honest, I've always been somebody, possibly largely because we do have 4 kids that are spread out and have a lot of things going on. And we've always struggled with the balance between letting the kids do the things they want to do and they're passionate about, and yet not running ourselves ragged. And so, but because of that, it turns me into, as we've alluded to, a taxi driver. And a lot of times when a kid explodes with another kid, I didn't really take the time to care about why they were, upset, or really give it the time that, and now I can look at it and go, okay, we're not rushed. We have the gift of time. We're not rushing anywhere. And so if somebody responds in a short, irritable, or sad way, I know it's not because they're exhausted. It's not because they run ragged. They may just be sad. They may be really sad because they got a reminder on their phone that they were supposed to have their 8th grade formal that day. Or here's, any of the things that they're losing out on. Now I feel like I can give them a little more grace in knowing why they're responding the way they are. And my kids are giving it to me for sure too, because they will say, Mom, you seem stressed about, A, B, or C. Our kids, since they're older than yours, they're usually, one of them is going to be awake before I get up in the morning, and they're going to be awake well after I go to bed. Even if they're not watching TV, they're just wired to be up later. And so I struggle where I need grace is, I think, with myself too, because I'm the kind of person that just really likes to have a schedule and a list. And I can be killing it all day long, but at 9 o'clock at night, if I feel like, you know what, I just need to go in my room and be left alone for a little while, I feel guilty about that. True or false?
You do.
It's true. And that's kind of silly. I've given them everything all day. It's okay if I want a little downtime. And so I need to give myself some grace in that for sure.
Yeah. Kelsey?
I think I'm seeing and needing grace in so many ways. I feel like there's been some grace in the change of pace. We've tried to be pretty guarded about our schedules even up to this point, and so we didn't have just a crazy amount of extracurriculars. But I especially, I think, thrive on a slow, relaxed pace. So not even having the schedule of school has been a grace and a blessing to us. I love that my kids can stay up a little bit later and I don't have to stress about them getting in bed on time so that they can handle a day of school, that we can skip nap if it's a beautiful day and the big two want to play outside in the afternoon. So just that flexibility and the change in schedule. Another thing that I've been thankful for and seen as a grace, actually Maggie Mitchell is the one who pointed this out to me, but just this long stretch where maybe it's been quite a transition to figure out how to do this, have them all home, but and especially now seeing as school's going to be out, just this extended period of time where we can develop a schedule and focus on certain things and carry it all the way through the summer. It's not going to be interrupted in a new way. And so we can keep on doing family worship, and we can keep on doing these chores and these things that we've tried to set in place. It's not going to have to change and then change back in the summer. And so we feel like that's a neat thing that we're going to be able to focus on and grow in our kids better because of the consistency. And then I think especially with the changes in his job, we just had to give a lot of patience and grace. His job responsibilities changed overnight basically, and took on a whole lot of a giant learning curve about videoing and editing and uploading, and I don't even know all the terms for all the things that he's doing at this point, but the schedule and the workload changed, and so just figuring out how to kind of merge what needs to happen at home and what needs to happen with his job and with church, and figuring out how to do all those things well, and then to give ourselves grace when they don't go well, when we make mistakes, or even with the kids. We've talked about how, you know, with one, I can be like really killing it with Annie at school. We're having a great school day, but I've stuck the 2-year-old in front of the TV for an hour because I needed to do school, or I'm, you know, really taking care of the 2-year-old, but I don't even know where the older two are. Hopefully they're still in the backyard or whatever. And so there's just a lot going on and a lot of new responsibilities. And so you can feel really good about how you're doing over here. And I'm sure it's the same like with work or whatever. You can really feel like you got your ducks in a row in one part, but then it's hard to have them in a row in all of the areas. So personal grace and grace to him, and grace for our kids, because this is quite a change for them too. So
A lot of grace.
Yeah.
Kelsey mentioned trial and error. I've had a lot of both. Nobody else knows this yet, but we recorded this a couple of days ago, and I trialed and errored my way through it, and we lost that file. And so here we are again, but there's a lot of grace from a lot of folks. The church has just overwhelmed me with gracious words and encouragement. I don't think I've ever gotten so many positive remarks about something I was doing. And they're not even sure who's doing what, but they're just thankful that it's happening. So it's been really rewarding to know that perfection is not the standard right now for anybody. And so it didn't have to be in my own mind. I think, though, that God's grace is going to work through this in really big ways in each of the families who are watching, that this is going to be a defining mark of a generation. It's going to be a lifetime, and it's just going to be kind of bored into our memories. And so God is going to use this in so many transforming ways, culturally, nationally, internationally, and of course in our homes. He's going to do something really big through this. And I think how we lead right now will be remembered by our kids, and those will be the stories that people tell, not just by our kids, but by our church and by our neighbors. And so I think God's going to do something through those to give himself glory. Wright, Guards, I thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for sharing your hearts and your families with us, for the extra 2 hours that you gave us. You've been a blessing to me. I love you all. So thank you for joining us on Light in the Darkness.
Thank you.
Thank you.